Today, we're diving into the world of mass timber, one of the most exciting and talked about innovations in building materials. Is it really the future of commercial construction? Can it stand up to the demands of a high-rise? Is it going to burn to the ground easily? Can it be a replacement for steel as the go-to material for large projects? We will address all of the safety concerns, cost implications, and benefits of mass timber in today's discussion with Ricardo Brites. He is the Director of Engineering and VDC at Mercer Mass Timber. And he is an expert at everything mass timber. I like it because Ricardo's not a sales guy. He's just going to give you the facts. That's why I'm having him on the show. We're going to get the facts on mass timber, give you some ideas on how you might be able to use it on your projects. Let's dive right in. This is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to Construction Genius, a leadership masterclass. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If you're a construction leader, you know all about the perspiration, and this show is all about the 1% inspiration that you can add to your hard work to help you to improve your leadership. Ricardo, welcome to Construction Genius.
Hello, thanks for having me.
My pleasure. What makes mass timber the future of commercial construction?
Well, mass timber is a very interesting material. It's a material that is renewable. It can be sourced infinitely, so it's always available, and it's very easy to work on site. So we believe that mass timber is the future of the construction industry, especially for the commercial buildings.
When you say it can be sourced infinitely, what do you mean by that?
Well, because it's a natural product, right? So mass timber is produced out of wood, yep. And wood comes from sustainable forests that are harvested like any other crop, right? So lumber grows, gets harvested, new lumber is planted in, so it's always available to be reused forever.
Yeah. So when I think of wood, I think of I live in California, and up north, 2 hours from here, some idiot drove his car into a ditch, lit it on fire, and started a forest fire. So,
yep.
When I think of timber, I think of burning. Yep. Is mass timber as strong as steel? What's the catch here?
In fire scenarios, it's better than steel, right? So, because wood burns, absolutely. Everybody knows that wood burns, but the bigger the section is, the more difficult it is to burn, right? So the charring acts on the surface of the wood, so the larger the element, the more difficult it is to put it on fire. So in fire scenario, wood, it's a misconception, but wood works better than steel on fire scenario. On a natural scenario, i.e. designing for the normal loads, seismic, etc., it works as good as other materials, right? It's as durable and as strong as other materials. Is it stronger than steel? The favorite answer from the structural engineers, it depends, right? It depends what you're comparing it for. In many cases, yes. We see it a very compelling product to compete with steel structures, especially sometimes compete, sometimes complement steel structures in a hybrid environment. So it's really a good material for commercial buildings.
So in a hybrid environment where, let's think of a typical commercial project, you can take your pick. In a hybrid environment, how does mass timber work in with steel? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes, absolutely. So it's very popular, and it became popularity in North America, the use of steel frames with cross-laminated timber decks, right? So you have the benefit of having a very quick and understandable structure that you know how to design, and you build it many times with a very fast deck system that doesn't have drying out times. It's very quick to put together. So normally we see the combinations of steel frame with the CLT decks. So that's what the name called, the cross-laminated timber CLT decks. And that's one of the most promising uses of mass timber. It's in this hybrid environment, but it can also replace steel. It's obviously a question of aesthetics, obviously, but also cost and availability of materials and procurement times, all of these things, but it can be used to replace completely or partially steel in structures.
How does the cost of mass timber compare to steel and other materials?
Yeah. Again, I will have to answer with it depends, Eric, if I may. So it really depends what you're comparing against. If you're comparing the whole structure, it's very close to cost neutral, right? If you're comparing foundations plus frame plus decks plus erection times, a big part of the equation, it's how long it takes to put the mass timber together versus other products, other structural products, it's coming very close to cost neutral. If you account for the potential benefits of getting the building ready faster, it's probably positive in some markets where this readiness to market is highly valuable. For example, if you're doing a multi-story residential building, and if you have the building ready, let's say 8 weeks quicker than what you will do with a traditional frame, means you have 8 weeks of potential income rather than works on site, right? So once you account for all of these together, it's cost competitive. When you account, and this is a comparison we see many times done wrongly, it's when you compare it very strictly frame for frame, i.e. I want to see cubic price per square foot of my frame versus the price per square foot of my mass timber frame equivalent, it will appear more expensive, right? Because you're comparing that component alone, not necessarily factoring in what's the savings I will have in site, what's the savings I will have in foundations because my structure is now lighter, and what's the savings I will have in installation crews because I'm installing with a team of 5 to 8 people rather than a team of 20, 30 staff members on site.
Okay, so let's break that down because I think that's where the distinction comes in. So you talked about foundation, you talked about the weight of the product, you talked about the installation and requiring less people. So walk us again, just nice and slowly through that logic of why mass timber makes sense and why you might pick it completely or in a hybrid situation.
Absolutely. So we need to understand what's the benefits of mass timber, right? So benefits are it's a lighter material. It's 1/5 of the weight of the concrete per unit of volume.
Yep.
It's as fast to assemble as a steel frame because it's all prefabricated off-site.
Yep.
And it's installed on-site with the team, with the crew, which is much smaller than your traditional steel crew or concrete crew. There is no wet trades on-site because it's all prefabricated.
Yep.
And everything goes very quickly on site. We are, generally speaking, on a reasonable footprint, 1 story of building produced every week. So that means you have an 8-story building in an 8-week period, rule of thumb, right?
So I understand you have no wet trades on the site.
Correct.
And do you have less people then just because it's lighter and you don't need as much muscle, or why is that?
Well, because it's everything is prefabricated, right? So all we have on site is a team. Imagine this is normally an analogy we use, Eric. Imagine this as your IKEA flat pack with your instructions. All the pieces come cut to size. There is no cuts on site. Everything comes prefabricated and delivered in the right sequence. So you're pretty much putting your building together with the hand tool, with the power driver, with the box of screws, and that's all you need to put your building together. So it's normally 1 guy or 2 at the crane, 1 or 2 where the materials are being delivered, fixing it and picking up the next panel. So that's pretty much the gist of the installation crew. So it's a very small crew in comparison to other materials, and it's a very quiet job site, right? You don't have these loud noises. There is nothing as disruptive to the community like other building materials.
Let me just ask you. You use the IKEA analogy, and I have to admit right away that doesn't. I went to the quality of IKEA, which isn't the highest, right? So how does the quality of the mass timber compare to the quality of steel? And I understand that they're different materials, and so they have to be described differently. But help me with that, because when you said IKEA, I immediately thought, oh, sort of sub quality. You know what I mean?
No. It's not the case whatsoever, right? So every panel, it's unique, and every panel has its own quality assurance procedures done in the factory to make sure that everything is done very precisely. So every element is produced with a unique ID number. It's produced with very strict quality and with a very strict tolerance. So we produce every element, and elements can be as big as 12-foot wide panels to 60-foot long elements. So you see how massive these are, with a tolerance of 1/16th of an inch. So that's very precise. And all the cuts, all the CNC, all the routings, everything these panels will have are produced in the factory. So this becomes truly pre-manufactured to site to be installed very efficiently.
You know, again, I'm thinking wood. How long does a panel last? I mean, I know it's a simple way of asking it, but how long does a panel last?
Yes, it needs to last, and it's designed to last as much as any other product on a job site. So the buildings made of mass timber needs to withstand exactly the same building code needs as any other product. So it's built to last at least 50 years, right? That's the short answer. The materials are, of course, not, or probably not, of course, but it's important to notice that are not to be exposed to the environment forever. So these are designed to be on a protected environment and not exposed to the elements. We understand that during installation there will be rain and all of this snow sometimes, and that's fine. But in service, as we say it, normally it's not exposed to the elements. So in this situation, meaning a dry environment, this could last virtually forever. But definitely it lasts the 50 years that the codes require.
So what would you say is the biggest misconception about mass timber, even as you go through all of these explanations and you do the cost comparison and you sort of zoom out and say, not only, I mean, we may be on material costs pretty similar, but on installation costs, there's where you save some money. Tell us about that biggest misconception.
Well, I think we touched already on two of them, Eric. One, it burns. So I need to be careful, because if I'm smoking and I drop my cigarette, the structure will just set on fire.
You're supposed to quit smoking. Come on now.
That's it, exactly, right? So it's a good incentive there. So, and the other one is, of course, the moisture and the degradation that can happen to the wood because it gets wet, it rots, and there is problems. Again, not exact truths, not lies as well, right? So all of this can happen. All of this is preventable, right? So we have the building codes in North America are very proactive, and we have very ambitious building codes that allows us to build structures up to 18 stories, as you probably know, in mass timber. Mm-hmm. And this means we have to have the structure to resist directly or indirectly, and I can explain a bit what that means, up to 3 hours of fire on a structure made of mass timber. What I mean by directly or indirectly, it's by charring, meaning letting the wood burn, and we know precisely how much it burns every minute, and that's a very easy number. It's 1.5 inches each hour. So we know exactly how much it burns. After 3 hours, it's 3 times 1.5 inches. So it's as easy as that. So we designed the members to withstand the fire that way. We can also protect the wood from fire by encapsulating it with gypsum boards, plasterboard, to make sure that it doesn't get fire in the first place. Or we can combine the two together, saying, well, the first hour it's gypsum board. After that, it's dealt by the charring itself. What I'm trying to say is that it's completely predictable and completely designable, the fire on a timber structure. Especially in mass timber, it's relatively easy. It's just a matter of resizing and upsizing the elements to make sure that it can deal with that. In terms of moisture, that's the other big misconception here. It's all about moisture management from site all the way to service, right? It's to make sure that the wood doesn't get unnecessarily wet. It's okay for the wood to get wet. It's not okay to let the wood get wet for a long period of time, right? So if it rains and the water washes away, no problem. If it rains and there's a pond on the flat roof for 2 weeks, that's a problem, right? So we need to make sure that during construction mostly, and then during service, there is no possibilities of water being trapped or ponding on a mass timber structure.
So are there any locations, geographic locations, that because of the weather, you would be less inclined to use mass timber versus another product?
I will say no, Eric. I'm based in Vancouver, British Columbia.
Yeah.
We say as a joke, this is Raincouver because it rains a lot of the time of the year here.
Yep.
And it's very popular. Mass timber, it's very popular on this market here, right? So funny enough, the markets that have more adoption of mass timber are probably some of the rainiest countries in the world. So Vancouver here in British Columbia, Canada, but also we see Pacific Northwest, Washington State. It has a lot of mass timber. I've worked a long time in England, United Kingdom, lots of rain there, Sweden, Finland. So these countries, Germany, of course. So these countries are probably the ones that have more mass timber, and it's the ones that has more water, if you add on the environment, rain, snow, some of them, and that's not a showstopper.
Why do you think mass timber has been slower to be adopted in the United States and in comparison to some of those Scandinavian European countries?
I think it has to do with code, first of all, and second, technology evolution, right? So
Right.
I mentioned before briefly, I've worked in Europe for some time, and the codes there have been promoting mass timber for 20 years now, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the code just moves in North America, the International Building Code. Only in 2018, 2021, it's really when it started to push more strongly towards mass timber. And that's a big changer, right? The other one, it's because of availability of material, right? Historically, the plants of mass timber products existed in Europe, and just the last 2 or 3 decades, it's really plants started to move here. And in the last 5-10 years, it's the big plants. I'm with Mercer Mass Timber, which is one of the largest suppliers in North America as we speak, that really build the scale, the production capabilities in-house in North America to produce the materials that the market needs.
Yep. Monty Python used to say, and now for something completely different. We're talking about mass timber here today, but I'm going to have a quick break to talk about my book. Oh yeah, Construction Genius. Effective, hands-on, practical, simple, no BS leadership strategy, sales, and marketing advice for construction companies. This is what you do. Go to Amazon. The paperback is $19.99. Buy 10 copies of the paperback for you and the leaders in your organization. Read the book together. You'll have an awesome time doing it. And then contact me, eric@constructiongenius.com. Say, Eric, I purchased 10 of the books. And I'll say, sweet, thank you very much. Now what I'll do is come in and do an hour session with your team. A Q&A on the book plus a bonus leadership training session. I would normally charge $2,500 to $3,500 for an hour of my time. And I'm going to do it for you for only $200. That's the cost of the paperbacks. That's a killer deal. So go to Amazon right now, buy the book. There's a link in the description and contact me and we will get something set up. All right, back to my interview with Ricardo. So what is the most impressive mass timber project you've seen?
Oh, there's so many. There's some very good ones in Sweden. Mm-hmm. The Thread Tower, it's one it was groundbreaking at the time. Like many of these buildings, they were the biggest in the world the time they were built. There is also very good buildings built in the UK. I've had the pleasure to participate in some of them. I suggest Dalston Lane and Bridport House, two milestone buildings in that market that push the boundaries to up to 10 stories, probably 10 years ago now, 8 to 10 years ago. And North America, definitely the Ascent Tower, UBC Brock Commons, kind of in my doorstep here. Mm-hmm. So these are all very important buildings, milestones of what the industry can bring, right? So what I like about these buildings is that it broke misconceptions about what the limits are for mass timber and push the boundaries of what we expect from these buildings, being that in terms of height, volume, etc., right? One building that I followed from distance, and the company I was with in London worked at as well. It's the NTU building in Singapore, which at the time of completion was the largest mass timber building in the world. I think it still holds that record. It's not very high, but it's kind of a horizontal skyscraper, very large building in Singapore. So you have some there.
What are some of the aesthetic benefits that you've seen with mass timber? Because maybe the beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but people, particularly with commercial buildings, you're used to sort of the
Yes.
steel structures. And then, with mass timber, it obviously has that wood look to it because it is wood.
Yes.
Tell us something about that. Is that something that's popular with people, or do they just want to cover it up with sheetrock, or how does that work?
It's very, very popular, Eric. So that's one of the main first drivers, I will say, for mass timber. It's the aesthetical pleasure of getting into a mass timber building. There is some studies on the biophilic kind of benefits of working on mass timber offices, for example. There are some studies done on that.
What do you mean by biophilic?
It's people feeling good working on a mass timber, on a wood environment, right?
Oh,
so
when they're in that environment, it has an effect on them?
Exactly. Psychological effect, good vibes, if you want, working on this environment. And it's very pleasing. It's very calm environment, and it's very beautiful, right? We see very often in the buildings, when the building is complete, everybody goes and tries to touch the columns and the beams and the walls.
Yep.
You never see that on a steel building because it's a cold material, right? You touch it and it's warm and it's nice to the touch. So definitely there is a aesthetical appeal to these shops, and we try very hard not to conceal the structure as much as possible, right? Even ceilings of buildings, etc. So as much as possible, that's part of the value added. It's to expose the structure and make sure that we can celebrate the mass timber elements.
What are the limits of mass timber? Where would you, if someone was saying, I'm thinking about using mass timber, or maybe doing the hybrid or something like that, and you would say, no, you shouldn't use it. It's not a fit for you.
Well, that's always changing, Eric. So it's hard to say where to stop. We've seen all kind of structures made with mass timber, from wind towers in Europe to commercial buildings, to office buildings, to residential, to very large span buildings. So it's very hard to say you shouldn't do it in mass timber. Where we see it more economically viable, it's definitely on the residential market, on the commercial office space. That's where we're seeing it being much more cost effective. But there is no red zones in terms of it's not possible to do in timber. Is it more efficient? Sometimes it's not the most efficient way, and we're here to help guiding people to the right approach. Again, I'm a big advocate of hybrids. So when timber alone is not the right solution, probably there is a combination that involves timber that is the best solution.
And I know you guys have 2 factories in the United States. What are the plans for expansion? Because I would imagine that if there's more adoption going to happen, you're going to have more factories in the US.
Absolutely, we have actually 3 factories in North America. The third one it's in Canada.
Okay,
in British Columbia, but in USA it's the one in Spokane, Washington, which was the old Katerra plant. If you recall.
I was
yes.
yeah.
You know certainly the story about Katerra. I know you have guessed about it. And so it's the old CLT plant from Katerra in Spokane, Washington. And there is the other plant, it's in Conway, Arkansas, which was the plant that was built by Structurlam probably 4 years ago. So we got these plants from acquisitions of Katerra assets and Structurlam assets out of bankruptcy.
You must have got a good deal on those Katerra assets.
I don't know. I was not in charge of those ones. I joined after that. No, but definitely it's still today, to my knowledge, the most state-of-the-art facility in terms of mass timber production in North America. So definitely it's a very powerful machine, if you want, that we have at our disposal. So these plants are capable, the 3 combined, are capable of producing 255,000 cubic meters of material a year, which is a number that is hard to grasp.
Yeah.
But I used to use this number, this example, it's one truck leaving one of the factories every 51 minutes of every business day of the year,
Wow.
right? So that's just to give you a sense of volume. So all of these factories are, of course, running. We are still far from tapping the full capacity of these factories. So answering your question, I think we have capacity for another 2 or 3 years to max out the capacity of these factories. And we are expecting this ramp up of mass timber demand in North America, right? There's some stats saying the growth, the year-on-year growth to be over 15% over the next decade. So we expect this facility to be sufficient to the market as we see it for the next 2 or 3 years. I'm not into the weeds on what's next, but I'm certain that Mercer, it will be definitely interested on keep leading the charge and keep being one of the key players on the mass timber world. So I hope they invest in more plants in the future.
Let me ask you this: what impact, if any, does union resistance to the adoption of mass timber play? Specifically, because you referred to earlier mass timber reducing the number of people involved on the job site.
We haven't seen much resistance from unions. In fact, we have worked with unions in some job sites where they provide the labor, and we work with them. They are very keen to learn this technology, right? People understand it's not taking jobs away from job site. It's to make sure that we do more with the people we have available.
Right.
And this is a technology that you can use less people to do more square footage if you want of buildings. So definitely there is, we haven't seen any resistance from unions to adopt mass timber.
What about the with the offsite work that you do, the offsite assembly? How much manpower is involved in the offsite assembly versus the use of machines, robots, all that kind of stuff?
Again, I will have to answer. It depends, Eric, if I may. So it really depends on the job and what's the needs, right? So most of the jobs, everything related to CNC, it's done 90% is automated, meaning there is a machine that goes over the panels, over the elements, over the beams, do the cuts, do all the machining that needs to be done. If there is membranes, secondary components that we are adding to those elements before they are shipped to site, then it's a manual labor. And normally it's a relatively small crew. I will say it's probably 5 to 10 people on a factory doing those secondary assessments and assemblies, if I may call it.
Yeah.
We also are exploring some options of prefab, full prefab modulars with some partnering firms, and where we're looking on to more the 3D modular and to full sub-assembly on the factory of the components as well.
Excellent. So what would you say is holding mass timber back from being mainstream in commercial construction in the U.S.?
I think it's pretty much fear of the unknown, if I may say, right? So a lot of people don't really know this technology well enough to be confident that this is something they can tap on. They can use, like they use concrete or steel or any other material.
Yep.
So I think that's the biggest barrier of adoption. The capacities here provided by North American suppliers and overseas suppliers.
Yep.
There is technology, there is expertise in-house, so it's just a matter of people knowing the technology and being comfortable with it so they can adopt it.
Excellent, excellent. So tell us more about Mercer Mass Timber and how folks can get in touch with you guys, Ricardo.
Absolutely. So Mercer Mass Timber, it's a whole subsidiary of Mercer International. Mercer International is a much larger company that focus on pulp and sawmills mostly. Also, they have small business in Sentinel wood and extracts, but most of it's pulp and paper and pulp and sawmill, and also mass timber. So mass timber came to the picture of Mercer International probably about 3-4 years ago with the acquisition of the Catera plant, and it's one of the key pillars of growth for Mercer International. It's to invest and grow the mass timber work. To get in touch with us, you can go to our website, easy, at mercermasstimber.com. You can reach out at clt@mercerint.com. We will be available for any inquiries.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, there's the website's excellent. You should check it out. We'll have the notes, the link in the show notes. Ricardo, this has been great. I'm just getting a
Thank
little
you.
introduction here. Appreciate you taking the time to dispel some of those misconceptions and go into a little more detail. Thank you for joining us on Construction
Thank you.
Genius. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you for listening to Construction Genius today. I hope you enjoyed my interview with Ricardo. I learned something about mass timber. I hope you did as well. Let me know if you're using mass timber and it works well for you guys. Let me know. Shoot me an email, eric@constructiongenius.com. Feel free to go out to where you get your podcasts and give the show a review and a rating. More reviews, more ratings gets the show seen by more people. And I'd really appreciate that. And if you think someone's interested in learning more about mass timber, feel free to send this episode to them, and then also go and check out Mercer Mass Timber's website. The link is in the show notes. All right, I'll catch you on the next one.